You're listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt Vecchio and Stephanie Erickson, tackling the topics that life throws in your way. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. A little bit of sunspring. Stephanie is slowly coming.
Slowly. I have a short sleeve shirt on.
All right, it's a start. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. Thank you for joining us. This is a show about the ins and outs of family life. All families seem to have their challenges. It could be about your elderly parents, could be about yourselves or your kids. We tackle these topics and try to navigate you through it with everything we can do, including great guests. We've got a couple lined up for you today. My name is Matt Vecchio. I specialize in senior transitions and free retirement home search, and I'm here with Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert. And Stephanie, I must add, producer extraordinaire. I saw you live in action on Monday at this wonderful L's for Autism. It was a golf tournament, charity event for autism, and the amazing Summit School. And you and your partner in crime, Chris Wynn, were videotaping that whole tournament in the rain. And but
yeah.
It was a heck of a tournament, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, the rain was definitely a bit of a downer, but man, people were so committed to that organization and that fundraiser. They did not care. People were, you played a full game. Well, I think you wanted to quit, but your partner wanted you to keep going.
You're right there. But it was fun. It was really well organized.
Yeah.
We had CJD's very own Andrew Carter was the MC, and if I'm not mistaken, Andrew and his son won low score of the tournament. They did really well.
Yeah, they did. He says it's his son, and apparently his son is an amazing golfer.
Well, we definitely give it to the son for credit there. And we had, for those hockey aficionados, we had Kerry Fraser. Remember that Kerry Fraser, the referee? He was there with Chris Nyland. So they did a heck of a job. So kudos to the organizing committee, Rob Collette, Jeff Houston, Tom Granger, and Todd Sue, and the very many volunteers. And dear to my heart, my daughter goes to Summit. She was one of those volunteers in the rain with her school buddies, Maria and Michaela. So shout out to all of them, and great job. And speaking of charity events, last Sunday, in fact, there was the annual Walk for Alzheimer's Montreal.
Yay.
And that was, I believe, the 13th annual edition,
Was it
another
really?
great fundraiser for Alzheimer's Society. And, you know,
Yeah, you did.
it's good weather. And, believe it or not, there are over 500,000 Canadians living with Alzheimer's or other dementias today. And that's just the individuals. If you take into account caregivers, family members, we're well into the millions. And there really is a stigma about Alzheimer's. And on the first half of today's show, we're going to be talking about that. And that's why we're so glad to have our first guest, April Hayward, Director of Programs and Services at the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal. Welcome to the show, April.
Thanks for having me,
coming
guys.
in, April.
Thanks.
So, April, you are going to be assigned the job of being the myth buster for Alzhmer's.
We should have thought about a jingle like ba-boom or something every time she, debunks one of those myths, right?
Well, but exactly. And so we're really pleased to have you here. You deal with families all the time. And it is quite stressful. I think the general public perception when you just hear the word Alzheimer's, there's this negativity. It's a stigma. And, oh boy, my life is ruined, or a family member or caregiver's life is ruined. And so we're so glad you could be with us to talk about some of these myths. And let's start off right there. Is life over when you hear someone has Alzheimer's, and for them or the family member?
I'm so glad that you asked this question, because it gives me a chance to discuss that a little bit. I think Alzheimer's is a word that carries so much fear for people. You hear even someone in your surroundings being diagnosed and go, "Ooh, it's I hope that doesn't happen to me." Even I've had the experience, as a representative for the Alzheimer's Society, we'll have like an information table somewhere, and sometimes people will literally avoid the table, like they don't want to even approach and get information because it just scares them so much. But Alzheimer's, I mean, there's so much we don't know about it. It's a disease of the brain. I think often when people think of Alzheimer's, they already picture this sort of late stage, nothing you can do, et cetera situation. And the reality is, when people are diagnosed, it's a progressive illness. If caught early, people can live sometimes for many years. still with a lot of capabilities, and they still remain very much themselves. This is something if you've had someone in your life diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I suppose if you hadn't, then it still carries that fear. But people are still, they remain who they are. They keep the talents and the abilities that they've had all their lives, but obviously with some modifications, and they can still contribute so much and very much be part of the community in a very active way. When I talk about this, I picture specific people even that I've known throughout the years who, and it's interesting because I generally have the chance to meet them after diagnosis, and we don't have that comparison of what they were doing before versus after, and we have the chance to sort of show this nice side of the family, but who discover painting and the arts and music after they've been diagnosed. And
I'm glad you brought up actually the arts. I did an evaluation on a client a few weeks ago, and her artwork, oh my God, it was amazing. And I guess she's always painted her whole life, but it was just beautiful. But we're going to talk about the myths, right? So let's get into the myths. One of the things, I already know the answer to this, but I'd like to hear it again because I always, myself, even though I know the answer, still get nervous when I'm forgetting things. And a lot of people say, memory loss is just a normal part of aging. And I think there's a bit of that might be a little bit true, that maybe our brains don't work the same way, but it's not really a normal part of aging, Alzheimer's. So,
Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging, and there's still that sort of belief that exists, and sometimes it's a reason people don't go get checked out, don't talk to their doctor about it, because they go, oh, well, that's a little bit normal, isn't it? Like, it's a bit normal to be forgetful, and they sort of brush it off. But Alzheimer's is a real disease process. You can see physical evidence in the brain. It's more than just forgetting your keys from time to time. We can all be forgetful, especially when we're multitasking, when we're trying to do too many things at once, when we're not paying attention, stressed out. A lot of things can contribute to changes in memory, but Alzheimer's is a real identifiable disease, and it should be treated seriously and discussed with your doctor.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. That was April Hayward from the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal. I'm Matt Vecchio here with Stephanie Erickson. We're going to open up the lines right away. If you have any questions concerning Alzheimer's, please call us at 514-790-0800, or you could text us at 514-800. April, one of the things I often hear with a lot of family and friends and clients and colleagues is, oh boy, your mom had it. This must be genetic, and you better be careful. So is it genetic?
So anyway, it's a bit of a complex answer. That's a really common question that we get. The majority of Alzheimer's disease is what we would call sporadic. That's to say, so we don't know the specific cause of Alzheimer's disease. Even the biggest, greatest researchers, and we have many here in Montreal, cannot tell you what causes Alzheimer's disease. We know that there are many risk factors involved. When it comes to genetics, family history does play a role, even in sporadic Alzheimer's disease. As in, if you have a family member diagnosed, it technically does increase your risk, but that doesn't mean you will necessarily get it. There is a much more rare form of Alzheimer's that we call familial type Alzheimer's disease. It accounts for less than 5% of all cases, and there it's really like a family history would cause you to get it. It's more of it's a dominant form. We had someone come to the society not that long ago to give a presentation on genetics, and it was incredible to me how complex that is. But that's to say, so that family history does contribute, does play a role. But when it comes to understanding, what brings about Alzheimer's, it's a combination of your family history, lifestyle factors, and your environment.
And sometimes you can be doing everything right and you still get it, or you can be doing everything wrong and you don't. And
Absolutely.
I think that's kind of one of the issues with a lot of health conditions, no matter what it is you see someone who's, smoking his whole life and never has a heart attack, and then someone who smokes a little or not at all and does. One of the things that I would like to talk about with you, April, in just a few minutes, I guess we're going to probably have to go over to traffic soon, but I want to talk about the myth that everyone thinks Alzheimer's is an old person disease.
Yeah.
And several weeks ago, we had Chris Wynn on, who's my production partner, and he was talking about his new film coming up called Much Too Young, which is talking about it's not early onset, it's young caregivers, but a lot of those people that have Alzheimer's are quite young.
I believe that just came out. Wasn't it introduced in
Toronto? In Toronto, but it's going to come out in the fall. We'll have Chris back to talk about it. But that's something people think is that, it's an old person's disease. So maybe we can talk about that in a minute, but right now we need to head over to the traffic.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt Vecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
You've been all over
love that song. And today is a beautiful day, huh, Matt?
Yes, it is.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Stephanie Erickson, family caregiving expert and social worker, here with my co-host, Matt Del Vecchio, retirement home search and senior transition specialist. And in studio, we are very lucky to have April Hayward, who works at the Alzheimer's Society. April, just before we went out to traffic, I had asked you a question. And if anyone has a question for April, you can text us at 514-800 or call us at 514-790-0800 if you have a question about Alzheimer's disease. Today we're trying to talk about myths and trying to clear up some confusions people have. The question that I posed to you before traffic was talking about that Alzheimer's is, most people think, is an old person's disease. Now, I don't want to panic anybody out there, because it doesn't mean that you're going to get it if you're younger, but there is early onset Alzheimer's. So it's not just about being old and this is something you're going to have.
Right. So the reason people think that is that, your risk does increase with age. So it isn't an old person's disease per se, but there's certainly more older people living with it. So the older you are, the more at risk you are of developing Alzheimer's disease. But there is early onset dementia. It's much more rare. There's that as well. So true early onset Alzheimer's, for example, of more than 500,000 people in Canada living with Alzheimer's, roughly 16,000 have early.
And what early onset?
Type.
What age is that, April?
That would be under 65.
Under 65.
Now, there are also related other types of dementia. I won't get into that necessarily. We don't have time for all of that. But there are also other types of dementia that tend to be diagnosed younger as well, like frontotemporal dementia, for example. And when you're diagnosed younger, it brings a whole other host of situations and circumstances in life. You may be still raising kids. You're still holding down a job. You're not ready for retirement.
Right.
It complicates things. So it's thinking of it as an older person's disease only might mean that we exclude or we don't focus on the needs of people who are younger living with this diagnosis. And I think there's so much room there for improved support and research around that.
Yeah.
You know, the phone lines are lighting up, Stephanie. It's obviously a hot topic. So let's get to a question right away, shall we?
Okay.
How about we have Judy in Point Claire. Hi, Judy.
Yes, hi, people.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, Judy.
I took care of my mom for, I would say maybe 3 years when she had Alzheimer's. And it is very hard to watch, of course.
Yes.
But the thing that I really triggered me to think that she had or was developing, and I'm wondering if you have heard of this before. She would be writing, and she'd say to me, "How do you spell such and such?"
Okay, so you're asking April about a symptom of Alzheimer's
Right.
disease in terms of writing. April, do you have an answer for that?
Right. Well, actually, on our website, if you go on alzheimer.ca, you'll see a whole list of things that can be warning signs. So what are some of the signs? No, that doesn't mean that you can diagnose with that list, but things that could be a warning sign. And, it's going to look different in every person. One of those things is changes in language, for example, whether verbal, written, or otherwise. And people, suddenly having difficulty doing some of those language tasks that previously came kind of naturally. So that could be among like a first indicator. It's really hard to know. They're so very personal. Everyone starts off also as having different kinds of skills and abilities. So, but when it comes to warning signs, for sure that's something that could be one. That doesn't mean that having difficulty spelling all of a sudden means Alzheimer's disease. But sometimes in looking back after a diagnosis, you go, oh, maybe that was kind of a first indicator.
So I guess a message there then you could say, April, is if it's something out of the norm, if it's something unusual for that person, that's when you go ask a doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Judy, thank you very much for the call. And April, you talked about it's personal, and I think that's a big part of it. 30 to 40% of the clients in my business are related to Alzheimer's, and I spend a lot of time with families, and I hear from them about their friends, and some good stories and some sad stories, but sometimes friends or families, which could be huge, a support network for them, they don't know how to handle it or what to do, and when in fact they could be a huge role for them. Can you give some recommendations as what friends of families with Alzheimer's can do?
I think people often have the best intentions, and they don't know how to be there, or they're afraid. We talked about stigma before. They might have concerns. So one of the first things for friends is just to be there. If you're not sure, ask. If you don't know how to help, ask. a message we give to caregivers all the time with people in their network is to be really specific with people, to maybe educate the people in their surroundings too, to take some of the literature that's out there and let them know about the diagnosis, because they may have sort of a good heart, but they just don't know how, and they may just not feel comfortable like they even have the knowledge to be there. Be there also as a friend about other stuff, we have people often say, people come over and all they do is ask, like, oh, how is he doing? And it all feels very heavy. And so sometimes I just want to hear, like, how are you doing? And what else is going on in the world? And, how is so-and-so's soccer practice? And what are you wearing to the party on Sunday?
Not even talking about the topic,
Yeah.
right? Just
it's really important to get a break from being always talking about the disease as well.
Yeah, but one of the things is for sure, certainly ask if you, and I guess that's the same in any situation. If you see people need help or you think they might need help, just ask.
Just ask, and maybe and even admit, like, hey, you know what? I really don't know what to do. That I want to be there for you, and I don't really know how. But just that can make a world of difference. That lets someone know that you're willing to be there.
Yeah, you're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Stephanie Erickson here with Matt Del Vecchio, and in studio we have April Hayward with the Alzheimer's Society. We're talking about myths related to Alzheimer's disease. Feel free to call in 514-790-0800 or text us 514-800 with your questions for April. The phones are ringing.
Yeah, we've got another question.
Yeah, so we got a question again for you, April. We're going to hear from Lori from Point Claire. Hi, Lori. You have a question for April?
Yeah, my mother was diagnosed. She's 85, and she was diagnosed by a neurologist in February.
Okay.
And he gave her the memory test, on which she scored a 24. Now, we had another one last week, and it was down to 18.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that quite a rapid decline in the space of maybe 10 weeks?
Okay, so you want to know, are you talking about, I would imagine, a Fulstein mini-mental is probably what you're talking about.
Yeah, the mini-mental. Yeah,
okay, exactly. So you're talking about a change in score. April, what do you say? Was that a fast decline?
It's again, not to give a non-answer, but it's so individual. So does it represent a change? For sure. Those tests, they give a certain portrait, but they aren't perfect either.
No.
Sometimes, we'll meet people with a specific score. Every two people you meet with the same score on a test are going to be very different also in their abilities and how that presents. So does it represent a change? Absolutely. Is a change expected? Yes. But I don't think there's a need to like read into that more than just it represents somewhat of a decline.
Yeah, and Lori, I would just like to add, only because in the evaluations that I do, and I'm doing these tests a lot, scores are just a snapshot of what's going on. Someone can have a 15 on 30 and be functioning in a lot of areas and doing quite well. Someone can have a 26 on 30 and really be having a hard time and not functioning as well. So just don't read into it too much. Just take it at face value, I find anyways.
Yeah, and doctors evaluate more than just the number on the test. They look at how is the person functioning in their day-to-day life, and that's just as important.
And I've even had some families, I said, going into the test, I knew Mom wasn't going to score well. She was just having a really bad day, didn't sleep well. So
good point.
So testing itself is stressful.
Absolutely, and it does fluctuate day to day. That's a good point, Matt.
But I would encourage you, if you're not sure about some of those things, to talk it through with a counselor, someone who knows you, someone from the Alzheimer's Society or another resource, for example.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to. First of all, Lori, thank you very much for calling in. It was a very, very good call. You talked about the Alzheimer's Society of Montreal, and just on your website alone, there's a whole ton of a whole ton of information. Could you, April, just explain the mission and what you can do for families that are going through what sometimes I think maybe they feel that they're on an island, and there are tons of resources for them?
Well, we have a lot going on, so I won't name every single thing that we do. You can find our full program on our website if you want to look at specifically all of the activities. But the Alzheimer's Society is a place for families to come, whether you're diagnosed yourself, whether you're caring for someone, or whether you have people in your family or in your network, to learn more about Alzheimer's, to get a better understanding, to be able to navigate the disease, to know the resources that are out there, to gain access to those, to get emotional support as well. We have counselors that you can meet with now in more and more places in Montreal. We're up to, I think, 12 or 13 service points where you can meet with someone free of charge. I know. Support groups, peer support groups, activities to keep the person stimulated and socializing with other people, and opportunities also for caregivers to be learning, to be meeting with other people, to get a time of respite. So we do have some respite services as well in day programs on the weekend, and in the home we have a team that can provide some stimulation in the home to allow the caregiver to go out.
Wow.
We
So
engage people with the arts, and we have an art therapy program. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, and my
But-
team's going to say, you didn't talk about
someone
about
who's
my
running that
thing."
program.
Yeah.
But I, what's really nice, what you're saying is that you have something where someone can call, speak with a professional, they can
Exactly.
speak with a counselor, they can speak with a peer, they can participate in a group. It sounds like you do one-on-one stuff. So basically, there's something for everyone. So make sure you give a
If
call.
you call, there's a professional counselor who will try to better understand your situation and
Great.
direct you, whether our own programs or elsewhere in the community, to things that will help you.
Okay, that's wonderful. Now, if people need to reach you, April, or the Alzheimer's Society, what would you suggest they do? What's the best
They
place?
can just give us a call. They can also write us an email or find us online, but they can just give us a call. We're at 514-369-0800.
And the website is?
Alzheimer.ca/Montreal.
Yeah, and we put that up on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page already.
Yeah, that's great. And Life Unrehearsed Facebook page, we're going to repeat that. So please go on it. Please like it. You'll have access to all our previous shows and existing shows. Lots of good information there. So, April, it's already done. Thank you so much.
Wow.
This is
So much,
obviously
April.
So
a
quick.
very,
I know.
very hot topic, and we really appreciate
This
your
has
time.
been great.
and
Thanks for having me.
Very
Pleasure.
informative. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, coming up next, we'll be speaking with Sarah Blunden. She's an expert on diabetes, another hot topic. But first, let's head out to the CJAD newsroom with Luciano.
Good afternoon. The federal government says it's not releasing any further details about the Canadian who was killed in last night's terror attacks in London. Prime Minister Trudeau confirmed the fatality in a written statement that also noted Canadians stand united with the British people. He adds the two countries will continue to work together to fight terrorism and bring its perpetrators to justice. 7 people were killed when police say 3 suspects drove their van into a crowd on London Bridge before going on a stabbing rampage in a nearby Market District. They were then killed by police.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt Vecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
Rocking out to Def Leppard, Pour Some Sugar on Me. It's a great song. It's perfect to introduce our guest. I'll get to that in just a minute. Well, welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Stephanie Erickson, social worker and family caregiving expert, here with my co-host, Matt Del Vecchio, retirement home search and senior transition specialist. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed, a show where we talk about all the challenges and the joys that can happen in life. Maybe if you're caring for a senior, if you're caring for young kids in the home, you've got some work problems, whatever's going on, we talk about it here. Very happy today to have in studio an amazing guest. She's a good friend of mine, actually, but she's also really good at what she does. Her name is Sarah Blunden, and she is a professional dietitian and certified diabetes educator. And we're going to be talking about some of the things that go on with diabetes, a bit of myth busting as well, huh, Matt?
Yeah, myth-busting show. Just speaking of that, before we forget, there were too many calls and
Yes.
texts from the first half. So thank you for calling in. We couldn't get to all your texts, but we do appreciate your calls and texts in. And I think diabetes is another hot topic.
Yeah, and to add, sorry to all the texts and calls that we didn't get to, June 25th, we have Dr. Howard Chetkow in studio. He's a neurologist, and we have him coming in talking about actually dementia. So make sure to listen in, and you can certainly send in those questions and comments at that time, or post them on our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page, and we'll get to them. So now, anyways, back to our guest. Sorry, Sarah, welcome to the
Yes,
show.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. So the first thing is certified diabetes educator. Why don't you just kind of explain to us what it is that you do?
Sure. So basically, a certified diabetes educator means that you are seen as an expert in diabetes. And we're in the community and working to help support patients, clients, their families, their friends. We also help with the doctors, nurses, pharmacists, dietitians. So really in the community as an expert on diabetes.
Okay, and is it just focused on like education, or you're doing things related? You're not doing anything about medication or insulin or anything like that. Yours is just strictly for helping the families, correct?
So a certified diabetes educator means that you're specialized in diabetes. So you do have the information and the knowledge in all the
Okay.
facets of
Medication,
yes.
nutrition, whatever it might be.
Exactly, yeah. So usually if we have families that have questions on the medication, the insulin, all aspects of diabetes, that we're able to help, respond, assist. And if not, we have other colleagues too that we can reach out to.
Oh, great.
You know, one of the questions that I get often is, what type of diabetes do you have? So if you could explain to us the difference between a type 1, I guess, and a type 2 diabetes.
Sure, yes. So type 1 diabetes is actually an autoimmune disease. So what that means is the body actually attacks its own pancreas, and then the body can no longer make insulin. And insulin is the hormone that we need to take the sugar from the blood and bring it into our cells. In type 2 diabetes, basically our pancreas is still making some insulin. We don't know how much, but the body is resistant to its own insulin. So people with type 2 diabetes can make changes with lifestyle, they can take medication, and they might take insulin as well as a treatment. But it's a different type 2 diabetes on insulin versus type 1 diabetes, where the only treatment currently is insulin.
So when you're talking about that, so is type 1 the one that people, when you're born, you would know right away that you have type 1, or is it something that you develop over time? Because in my mind, type 1 is like childhood diabetes that then just continues through your life, and type 2 is when you're older.
Yeah, so type 1 used to be called juvenile diabetes. We don't call it that anymore because we're having more actual adults being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
They live their whole life without the diagnosis?
Yeah,
Oh my
so
God.
they live not showing symptoms, and it's called LADA, which is like a late onset of type 1 diabetes that we're seeing in adults. So it is autoimmune in the body.
In fact, my stepdad fits right into that category of type 1, but later on in life. I was amazed at some of the stats. 11 million Canadians with either diabetes or pre-diabetes. That's 1/3 of the Canadian population. It's amazing. So what is the difference between diabetes and pre-diabetes?
And in that stat, there's a very small percentage that would be type 1 diabetes. It's usually less than 10%. So in that stat, it's pre-diabetes and diabetes. So basically the difference is pre-diabetes. It really has to do with the diagnosis. So that's why we urge everyone to have a family doctor, test their blood, going to the lab, testing the blood often, and then that's where we can see. Because if we diagnose pre-diabetes, then there's some lifestyle modifications that we can do to not then be diagnosed with diabetes. So the difference between the two is really the values in the lab and where we're at, and then at that point, the treatment as well, what we can do.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Stephanie Erickson here with Matt Del Vecchio. In studio, we have with us Sarah Blunden, professional dietitian and certified diabetes educator. Sarah, you're talking about pre-diabetes and being able to make lifestyle changes, which is great because this is something that we get a warning sign. Hello, wake up. You need to do something. And I have to, hats off to my husband because the same situation had happened to him. And I was really proud of him because he took it very seriously. He got heavily into exercise. He took up spinning, and now he's biking. He biked to St. Dan and back. He's really taking it seriously. He's made some changes in his nutrition, and he's no longer considered to have pre-diabetes. But lifestyle changes are not easy, no?
Exactly. You have to be motivated. You have to have the support. He's lucky I'm his neighbor.
That's true. That's true. We also have a consultant at the corner. And he listens to you way more than me.
But no, it is hard. But I think what's really rewarding, which I know he noticed as well, is once you start and you get going and you see results, this is usually what really motivates people. And so having that plan in place and having the support to be able to do it, this is usually what motivates us.
It's almost the opposite of what's more difficult to manage, and I think they weigh in on each other. If you start seeing results, then that becomes a motivating factor for okay, I've got this.
Yes.
So do you see a lot of that when you're getting questions of what do I have to do? Do I have to go to the gym more often? Do I have to eat better? Probably yes, and but once they start seeing results, I guess it feeds itself.
Exactly. And I think what's really important as a diabetes educator is I have the knowledge, and I could say to someone, you have to do this, this, and this. But if they're not motivated and that's not their goal and they have no interest, they're not going to do anything.
Right.
So for me, it's really questioning and saying, what is your goal? And how do you think you can get there? And then at that point, I can help guide them and give them the tools. Because a lot of times we tell people, you have to eat this way, or you have to go to the gym this many times, and nobody does it because it's not necessarily their goal or their objective.
That's right. And I guess that's the same thing with anything. We can't make anybody do something, but helping them discover what's important to them, finding their own solution. So this is a really hard thing for us to do, huh, Matt?
It is the mental and actually doing.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to say there's some myths out there about diabetes, and one of them I think is that you can't eat carbohydrates. And I'd like to talk about that because I don't think that's true. I think we can eat carbos. Certainly, my husband eats carbos, and he still has managed to lower his sugar levels. Do we say sugar levels? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, blood glucose.
Glucose. I knew there was a correction there. And so maybe we can talk about that. Would you like?
Sure,
you can
sure.
answer that question.
Yeah,
Great.
definitely. So,
hang on just a second.
yeah.
We're going to head out over to traffic,
Sure.
and then when we come back, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
This is Life Unrehearsed with Matt Vecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
Rolling Stones, Brown Sugar. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. Stephanie Erickson here, a social worker and family caregiving expert with Matt Vecchio, retirement, home search, and senior transition specialist. And we're here with Sarah Blunden, who is a certified diabetes educator. We played that song Brown Sugar in your honor. And just before we went out to traffic, we were actually talking about diet. Probably brown sugar is maybe it would be something you would recommend. I don't know. But my question to you before traffic was really about carbohydrates.
Yes.
I used to think personally, I thought that too. You have diabetes, you're not supposed to be eating carbohydrates, but that's a myth, right? So what is it about nutrition that people should really be thinking about?
So carbohydrates is actually our main source of fuel. So we do need to eat this. This is things like rice and bread and pasta and potatoes. So we do need these foods. It's just making the healthy choices, the combinations, and looking at the quantity. So what that means is looking for foods that are high in fiber. So carbohydrates that have a lot of fiber in them is very important, and trying to pair them with a protein. So in the morning, if you're having toast with a lot of fiber in it, you want to put some peanut butter on there to make it a nice combination. So I think it's looking at carbohydrates are important to fuel our body, and we do need them. And it's just not having, 5 toasts in the morning, but maybe 2 toasts. So it's looking at adding a lot of fiber, having it with a protein, and watching the quantity that we're having.
Yeah.
I'm listening to you describe that, April, and I mentioned my stepdad is
Sarah.
type 1.
You said April.
Yes, Sarah. Thanks for
April was
clarifying.
before, and we were talking about memory. Great.
I'm checking myself.
I'm
in
hiring a
with
new co-host soon.
Right. Yes, I may be calling April.
Exactly.
Sorry, Sarah. So describing my stepdad, with listening to you about nutrition, he is very disciplined. You're talking the peanut butter and the fibers and insulin injections. Very disciplined, yet sometimes he still has an episode or two of diabetic shock, which I think they call hypoglycemia, correct?
Hypoglycemia, yes.
And I've seen it firsthand, and it's pretty scary. So usually mom is kind of the hero of the day, and rushing to get a glass of orange juice is typically what they would do, and she would give him a glass of orange juice. So it seems to work. So I'm assuming they're doing the right thing. Are they doing the right thing? And are there other suggestions that could be done? Because even in the public, sometimes we've seen this. It might be good information to have.
Yeah.
Definitely. So if ever you see someone, actually a very good analogy of someone who's having hypoglycemia, which is a low blood sugar, they sometimes even appear drunk. So you can speak to them, and if
good
they...
excuse.
If
No,
they,
officer, I'm hypoglycemic.
So if they're having trouble concentrating, hands are trembling, sweaty, these are usually signs of hypoglycemia, which is the low blood sugar. So the blood sugar is low, we need to give them sugar fast. So that would be juice, candies, regular Coke. There's glucose tabs that we can buy at the pharmacy. A lot of times people will tend towards something like chocolate bars or cookies, but this is not a good idea because they contain fat. And the fat will slow down the absorption, and we want the sugar fast. We need it quickly to bring it to the brain. So you need pure sugar.
Excellent. That to me seems like the only benefit is being able to have an excuse to eat pure sugar, because that is something that I do. Off air during the traffic period, Sarah, we were talking about the stigma, and I was surprised actually to hear you say that a lot of people who have a diagnosis of diabetes feel ashamed. They feel like they've done something to cause this. Now, obviously, with type 1, this is how you're born. Type 2, though, there are some lifestyle factors that could contribute. So how do you work with people about that stigma or shaming aspect?
Definitely. So we try to explain how is diabetes diagnosed. So type 2 diabetes has a very strong hereditary component. So often we'll joke and say, well, you can't choose your parents. So you have those genes. And then it's looking at all lifestyle. So your exercise, how you're eating, how you're sleeping. Sleep is so important that we don't speak enough about. Your stress level, there's positive stress, there's negative stress. So there's a lot around that can lead towards type 2 diabetes. And so it's not because you had that extra bowl of ice cream is the reason for the cause of your diabetes. So I think there's a lot of stigma around that. Type 1 diabetes is we don't even know the cause. We're 2017 and we don't know the cause. The body attacks its own pancreas. So there's really nothing you can do. It's no one's fault. We don't even know the cause. So very important when someone is diagnosed with diabetes that they're explained the diagnosis and what is the cause or the possibility, and really remove that from them, that it's not their fault.
Yeah.
It's excellent information, and we're already done, Sarah. It goes so
crazy.
quick,
So
but
fast.
fascinating information, very, very informative, and we really want to thank you for your time for being with us. Now, where can people reach you, and can you give us some information?
Definitely. So a really great resource is Diabetes Canada. So their website is diabetes.ca, so you can get a ton of information.
And we'll post that on the Life Unrehearsed Facebook page as well.
Perfect. And I work at LMC Diabetes and Endocrinology, which you can find information there at lmc.ca. And you can always reach me with questions at 514-744-5620. And I'll be happy to help.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having
very
me.
good.
Sarah.
Next week, and a lot of these topics come from you from our Life Unrehearsed Facebook page. We have a very fascinating guest, Sabrina Camisano, who's going to be talking about end-of-life law, very hot topic as well. And we will have a wonderful lady, Andrea Brody, who will be talking about her personal story about postpartum depression. So thank you for joining us. We're on live every Sunday at 4 o'clock. And we'll be heading to news shortly.
See you next week.
You've been listening to Life Unrehearsed with Matt Vecchio and Stephanie Erickson. Brought to you by Severia Mobility Products, providing you better mobility for life. Call them at 1-800-931-5655.
It isn't easy to overcome mobility issues, but Severia can help. At Severia, we make your world easier to navigate with a full range of accessibility products, from basic stair lifts and wheelchair lifts to the most luxurious home elevators and accessible vans. Get a free in-home assessment or visit our new beautiful accessible showroom on Highway 13 in Laval. Expert installation and service. Severia, better mobility for life. 1-800-931-50